When was the last argument you had? Well, if you're like most of us, it hasn't been that long a time. Arguing seems to be part and parcel of who we are as human beings. And that's understandable, I think, because on a planet with billions of people and um, everybody's got their own opinion, own views, differing ideas. You're bound to run into differences and arguments. So that's just part and parcel of life. But we have to figure out what to do with arguments and not to let them, tear us apart or cause us too much pain. And that is kind of the thing. Now, some people love to argue, you know, and others avoid arguing like the plague. But arguments can be either helpful or hurtful. They can be constructive or destructive. And that kind of depends on one's definition of what arguing is for, really, I think. Now, our usual definition of arguing, what an argument is two people or two groups of people trying to convince each other that each of them is right. I try to convince you I'm right, you try to convince me you're right, and we usually tell each other why the other one was wrong. Now, that is our usual definition of arguing and how it usually a lot of times happens. But that's what leads to end of relationships if it gets too bad. That's what leads to gridlock in Congress. That's what leads to tensions between countries that lead to war. When one has to be right and the other is wrong, and that's it. Two groups of people disagree. Well, there's nothing left except to have conflict. And that causes us and has caused us all kinds of trouble. So it's good to kind of figure out, well, how do we make it so it doesn't cause us problems? Arguing can be constructive. Now, the definition of arguing, a good definition, however, a helpful definition, is a non-judgmental of sharing of differing views. That facilitates going forward together. I share my view with you, you share your view with me, and we listen and if we can reach a compromise, great. That can be constructive. That can help us understand each other. That can help us agree on where to go, how to go forward. But we have to hold that as the definition of arguing, of arguments, and actually do that. So there are some ways to keep in mind as to have constructive arguments rather than destructive arguments. Some people argue just for the fun of it, just to pull each other's chains or to push each other's buttons. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of fun. I've been known to do that myself. But two people better know that that's what they're doing, it's just for fun and it's not that serious. Otherwise, it could lead to problems. So just that kind of arguing is fun. It can be fun. But I'm talking about kind of how, on a daily basis, general basis, how we keep arguments from devolving into hurtful, painful things. First of all, it's good to keep in mind that people don't argue over unimportant things. The bigger the argument, the more important the thing is that they are arguing about, or the more important the value they are arguing about. Now, it might not seem like it. Two people might be arguing over whether to paint the living room sea spray or sandy beach. Now, to somebody else, it doesn't seem like a very important thing to argue about. And they probably aren't arguing just over the color. They're probably arguing over some deeper thing that they might or might not be aware of. There's something deeper, something more important. And because we argue over things that are important, we don't argue over things that are not important. And a lot of times, those important things that we're arguing about is something that has to do with me, who I am. Part of me is at stake in this argument. And that is a very important thing for all of us. What is at stake? What is about me that is at stake in this argument? Is it my reputation? Is it my expertise? Is it my self-image, my self-worth, my self-value that I have to defend in this argument? And if I lose that argument, those things go down the tube. A lot of times that's kind of what it's about. And a lot of times arguments, we argue with people we love because we're not quite sure if they value my opinion or if they care about what I think. And I have to hear that. I have to hear, well, do you care that I want this room painted this color? Do you care that I, have this viewpoint? If I'm not sure of that, I'm going to ask, I'm going to test, and arguments are usually about, a lot of times about that. Do you really care that I have an opinion different than yours? And if you don't, well, why am I in this relationship? See, that's very important. That's a very important thing. And it's worth the argument. People argue over things that are important. So knowing that people don't argue over minor things, and so we don't assume when we're in an argument with someone that they are arguing over minor things. It's something important. And second, another point is we need to listen. We have to listen, to put aside our opinion, our viewpoint, somewhat, so that we can listen and be open to what someone is saying, and not just as they're speaking, getting my argument ready. So when there's a pause in the action, I can say what I think. No, that doesn't work. And to listen attentively, and listen for what is the value that is most important. It's not just the color they're going to paint the living room. Listen to what they're really arguing about. What's at stake for them? And ask clarification. Ask questions. Why is this important to you? What is this? Help me understand. That's really important in arguments. And that can make arguments go better, discussions go better, and be more constructive. Another part of this is when you are stating your opinion, just your position, state it clearly, and say it in ways that is you. This is what I think. This is what I believe. Refrain from saying, well, it's obvious, everybody knows this. Or refrain from saying, well, everything, all the studies show this, you're stupid for, not even knowing that. Don't do that. Say, this is what I believe based on my experience, my research, my whatever, and just say it from your point of view and say it clearly, and don't compare yours with theirs. Don't say, well, obviously I got a better opinion than you, or I'm more informed than you. Don't do that. Say, this is what I believe, and put it out there, and just offer that to them, and they will do what they will with that, but that's theirs. And also then trust that you, when you're in the argument, are not at stake. Nothing about you is at stake. Nothing about you as a person is at stake. Your reputation, your self-image, your worth as a human being is not at stake in any argument. You have your opinion and you're entitled to it. They have their opinion and they are entitled to it. So don't take it personally. Just put the information out there and listen to the information that they give. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and there's not necessarily right or wrong in any of those. It's what we believe, and we share that with each other. And if we do that in a way that is open and caring about each other, well, that makes arguments constructive rather than destructive. And when possible, that can lead to compromise, and to compromise on the less important things. Those things that is not life and death. Be willing to compromise on those. Engage this, and sometimes compromise isn't possible, and you have to choose one or the other. But if it's not that important, it's not that important. But on important things, it's important to engage in the discussion and to kind of figure out how to continue the discussion, because some things are worth discussing and arguing about. But know what the difference is, what's unimportant and what is important. So hopefully, these are some tips or some ways that can help you, and hopefully it helps you kind of engage in those arguments, be in those arguments, and maybe make them a little bit more constructive rather than destructive.